I talk a lot about fatigue, and I think it's a really important concept to understand. To be honest, I'm still learning a lot about fatigue and how it affects us as humans. In really simple terms, like what fatigue is a protective mechanism that keeps us from overutilizing our energy resources. Basically, it's a form of protection because we are not a machine, we are an organism that requires rest and replenishment of our resources, right? So things like, uh, just even food and sleep and for us social support are really important. And then if at like a lower level, having enough of the macro and micronutrients to start to utilize for fuel, not having doing so much work that we start to cause problems with our tissues like our muscle and our tendon and bone. All these things, like, they require us to, we need to stimulate them, we need to use them, but we also need to let things replenish, just like any other resource that is out there. We have to let the soil replenish over time. We have to allow trees to grow. So it's really that same concept where, like, our we are trying to stay alive, and to do that we need to basically work but then recuperate so that we can go do the thing again. So fatigue is actually like a protective mechanism. And I think that's one of the best ways to think about this, is you incur fatigue so that you don't hurt yourself, right? If you're tired, you can't put out what you can when you're fresh, and you can't do that repetitively because, again, you're an organic creature, right? So there's a ton of like physiological cascades going on when it comes to like what fatigue is. But if you just think about it as a protective mechanism and as something that's trying to keep you from overdoing it, it makes a lot of sense. And then you look at a lot of the problems that people have, whether that be from psychological stress or physical stress, they push through fatigue in a way that is non-advantageous. So they have a decrease in performance over time. And that then also leads to further physical and psychological or physiologic problems. And that's really what it boils down to, is you have to stress yourself. You have to rest in some capacity or recover in some capacity, and you have to do it again. And that looks so different for different people for different goals. And that's just really a product of, repetition in time and what people are pursuing, genetics, the environment that they're in, and the constraints that they have. All these things are that you can't isolate them. And that's really what's really hard about working with humans, is the context matters a ton. But understanding fatigue better. And so fatigue is downstream of stress, right? So we stress, that incurs fatigue. We get, hopefully some performance benefit over the long term, but in the short term, we might not need to just recover. And then we can better handle the stress again, maybe even incur more stress. And that's why I think stress is also a really important thing to understand. And basically, stress is anything that is disruptive to you as an organism, right? We can handle stuff that is like within a bandwidth that we would call maybe homeostasis, but then doing hard things is challenging, which can be good. Doing excessively hard things is excessively challenging, which can make it problematic for us to adapt to, right? So the main point of this is understanding that basically humans are trying to survive. There are things that are beneficial for us to do, but they are going to fatigue us, because if we could do them forever, it wouldn't actually be beneficial. It'd be like if you could put your hand on a fire but not feel anything, but it would still do damage to you. That would not be good. And like, that's what a lot of this boils down to, is we're trying to protect the organism in the long haul. So again, I'm still learning about fatigue mechanisms and all this type of stuff, but I hope this is helpful to conceptualize fatigue and why we need to manage it. How you go about managing it is appropriate work, sleep, social support, monetary support, and all sorts of other things that, are just human needs. So appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. Peace.